Okay, well, let's get started. Let's bring the energy. So welcome today to our session live on ServiceNow. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about Now Assist for HR service delivery. And we're going to talk about configuration and leading practices, really how to get you started with a deployment. This will be recorded. I'm your speaker today. I'm Mike Sheridan. I'm the Emerging Practices Technical Director in the Emerging Practices team here at ServiceNow. I've been at ServiceNow for a little north of 8 years, come from a background of development. So my role today consists of leading practices, guidance as it relates to Now Assist for HR service delivery. So thanks for having me. All right, before we get started, like any presentation, we're presenting the safe harbor notice. So we may talk about things today that are forward-looking, so don't make any decisions based on anything that's covered in this meeting that's stated about future product. Always wait for GA to make those business decisions. So we have a code here that you could scan for ServiceNow, live on ServiceNow interactive event series. So this is just one of many. So if you scan the code, you could get the details on the future events, and we welcome you to join those. We always have some great information to pass along, and it's always a great time for you to ask questions as we move forward. I'll say just a little bit of housekeeping. So we've saved time. We have some time allocated at the end for Q&A. So if there's some larger questions, we could certainly address those at the end. We have the Q&A function within the webinar, so you can hit the Q&A button in order to ask a question, and we can answer it through the Q&A section of this webinar. Again, please put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, because the ongoing recording that Q&A will be part of it. It just helps out others in the future. This presentation will be recorded and shared on the ServiceNow community, so you could pass along the details to your peers that weren't able to join today. And lastly, after the event today, you'll be prompted to fill out a short survey. We welcome your feedback. It's how we grow with these live on ServiceNow webinars. So please submit that feedback, and we'll improve as we go. Okay, so the agenda today, what are we going to talk about? So first, I'm going to talk about what is Now Assist. How does that relate to our business processes? How does that help us out? We'll talk about pre-implementation. So there are some things that we have to think about before we get started. Are there customizations? There's a lot of details that we're going to cover about the pre-implementation to put you off on the right foot. We'll talk about some challenges that we've seen with past implementations. And then we'll get into some details around knowledge management and best practices, as well as conversational catalogs. It's another element that we use within Now Assist for HR service delivery. And then there are some considerations to think about and some caveats and some, the good, the bad, the ugly, if you will. And then lastly, I'll go through a demonstration. And in the demonstration today, I'll go through some result improvement rules. So how I can boost some queries, how I could boost some articles based on where I'm located. And then we'll close out with any Q&A. So to get started, we're going to start off with a poll question. So we just want to know where you're at with your HR service delivery, Now Assist for HR service delivery knowledge. Are you brand new? Do you think you're average? Are you an expert? The reason being is because some things I may go into a little more depth based on the majority of the group, and it seems like the majority is relatively new to Now Assist. So we'll make sure that we cover those fine details that will be important to know just getting started with Now Assist for HR service delivery. So I'll give about 10 more seconds for you to fill out the poll. And for those I've answered already, thanks for answering. For the experts on the call, thanks for joining. Okay, we're going to end this poll and continue forward. So just you could see 71% novice, 27% average, and 2% in the expert range. So got a good focus for today. Okay, so what is Now Assist for HR? And it's something we use to boost the employee experience. So one thing we could do is empower employees to self-service. So I could get the answers to my questions, or I could get my request completed without having to engage. So it's not a matter that I'm facilitating some back and forth. It's I access the portal, or I access VA, I ask my questions, or I start my request, and then I move on. So we're empowering those employees to do that self-service. The next is we're boosting HR productivity for those agents. So we're able to solve our HR cases faster through process automation, through AI generated case summaries and suggested resolutions. So it's not a matter that I have to click a bunch of places in order to get different information or serve up different dialogues when I'm going to resolve a case. And as a support desk lead or the support desk manager, there's times where I just want to get a pulse of a case. An agent's working on a case. How do I get the full details of all what's being done in that case in a quick manner? And that case summarization allows us to do that. So instead of traversing through 60 activity log updates between the requester and the agent, I could just have those summarized so I could get a good idea of what's happened with the case. Again, boosting that agent productivity. And then last but not least, we're transforming fast on one AI platform. So we always boast about the power of the platform, and AI being on the platform allows us to do things like act quickly and then benefit from the ongoing innovation. And some of you may already have experienced the agentic AI. So we're moving very fast in the world of AI, and Now Assist allows us to keep all of that on the platform, have the power of the platform, and have all of that functionality agnostic to one specific BU or one specific application. So how can Now Assist contribute to the growth of your business? So there's things that we could do where, like answering questions from users, so we don't have to engage an agent, so giving that better experience. We can resolve incidents and cases faster. So using those resolution notes, using summarization, and some automation that we have with Now Assist is just improving the business. We're optimizing the workforce productivity. So sometimes we're having agents working on mundane tasks, and we want them to focus on the more business strategic tasks or on the higher priority, and it allows us to do that by optimizing that productivity for our agents. Decreasing human error. Sometimes we mistype, we misunderstand. So we're trying to decrease the probability of human error, and then delivering time to value faster. So creating the skills, utilizing the skills, utilizing Now Assist allows us to automate, allows us to facilitate efficiency, and ultimately is delivering faster time to value. And overall, it's increasing our process efficiency. So we're not having things fall through the cracks. We're delivering a better experience. So all of these benefits empower your business to drive productivity and growth while reducing costs. So now digging into the nuts and bolts. So we want to implement. So what should the focus be? And where I like to start is those elements that are feeding into Now Assist. One of those big elements is AI search. So there's times to where I've been called in to help with an implementation, and I start looking around to see, what the low hanging fruit is, and I could see that AI search wasn't even enabled. So that wasn't something that was being used. So certainly AI search needs to be enabled in order to get started. The next is our AI search tune. So let's just say we have been using AI search, and now I want to tune AI search. So how can I do that? We have a lot of documentation in this area, and I narrowed it down to three specific areas. One is result improvement rules. So result improvement rules allow us to boost documents. So when a specific keyword is used within the query, I could use that to focus on a specific document. In our demonstration today, I'll use a result improvement rule to accommodate for the use case to where I'm a fulfiller and I have access to everything in my knowledge base. But when I'm searching as an employee, I don't want to see everything. I just want to see things that are specific to my location. So the use case that we use today for a result improvement rule is that I want to find out about my tuition reimbursement and it's specific to my state. So I just want to see, at the top of the list, my state in the results that are returned from my query. So if I query for what are my tuition reimbursement policies, it's going to throw my state at the top. And we do that through a result improvement rule. And ultimately, these help to train the LLM, making our Now Assist better. And there are some tips and tricks I'll talk about as I get into the demonstration, but just at a high level, result improvement rules could help us boost things like the use case that I just mentioned, as well as other things. There's a lot of use cases for result improvement rules. Very important to know what they can do, how you could use them, so you could give that better experience, before a UAT. So going in UAT, we have a great experience already, not trying to tailor the experience after UAT. The next item is synonym dictionary. So there are key terms that we may use in our business practices that are not industry standard. One example is in the days of old, I was helping a customer implement some knowledge management, and they were having issues where they referred to a transmission as a pig. And I've never heard that in my life. And I thought I was a pretty mechanical minded individual. But my point being is there are some terms that may be specific to the business that are not industry standard. And we want to use those as a synonym in order to understand what the user is talking about and return the relevant information. And then last but not least, within AI search and tuning, we have our stop word dictionaries. So there are some times to where stop words could help us out. So things like the, and, words that are repetitious that may be included in the search query and may be appearing in a document, in a topic, in a catalog, that are starting to weigh in on the weight of the document, and we don't want that to happen. So we use stop word and within the stop word dictionary to facilitate, discounting those stop word terms in order to facilitate a better search and get better results. And then our last topic we'll talk about specific to AI search are the search profiles. So we have our search sources. What do we want to be able to return to users? Do we want all of our knowledge bases? Do we want certain knowledge bases when we're talking about Now Assist for AI search? Do we want to include all? Do we want to have specific knowledge bases? Do we want to have specific catalog items? And just to put things in perspective, I have one customer who wanted to exclude some specific knowledge articles within the search because they were meant for archive purposes, not so much for serving up as the de facto or the golden record for what I'm searching on. It was just more of a archive scenario that they wanted to keep them, but didn't want them as part of the search. So we could facilitate that through the search source. There's other methods to do that, but having the search sources and the search profiles, and typically we see those search sources the same for any portal search that we have for a VA search. So we're giving as close to the same experience as possible. So very important to make sure that AI search is on, that you have your AI search tuned, and then you do that by leveraging things like result improvement rules, synonym dictionaries, and stop words. And again, if there's any questions, please put those in the chat, or excuse me, in the Q&A, not in the chat. Okay, so pre-implementation, what do we need to consider for virtual agent? And again, that virtual agent is enabled. Not everybody is using virtual agent against recommendations. We certainly want you to be able to deliver that experience that VA delivers. And then some things we have to think about was, were we using natural language understanding and using that model prior to Now Assist? So if we were, we have a utility that migrates those NOU topics to the Now Assist LLM. So if it's a matter of, well, Mike, you tell us that you want us to use Now Assist, but we're using NOU, how are we going to get there easily? And you can leverage that migration utility to migrate those topics over. Simple process. You just really have to click the button. And then next, what we have to do is evaluate our conversational and non-conversational catalog items. This is also something I'll show within my demonstration. I'll show the overview that shows you what's conversational, what's non-conversational, and we'll look at one specific item that's non-conversational, and how do we get past that? How do we identify that where the system is doing a lot of that work for you? So more pre-implementation steps around HR case, and some things we have to think about if we were using HR service delivery prior to our Now Assist implementation for HR service delivery. So some things we have to think about, are there any additional input fields that would facilitate a case summarization? So there's a lot of customers that have custom fields on their case form, whether it be one specific COE or agnostic to one COE. It's just information that you may want to have as part of the summary. We have fields out of box that we summarize, like the short description, the activity logs. There may be some additional fields, so you have to calculate those in. So we have custom fields. Do we want those as part of the summary? Those are things that I'm sure with your implementation partner, or if you're implementing it yourself, those are things you're going to want to cover to make sure that you're summarizing the data that you would expect and get the output that you would expect. Short description and description fields, are they out of the box? So have you had any changes to any of those out of box fields that may cause unexpected results or failures within Now Assist? Although my experience, I haven't seen any customers or any implementations I've worked with that have modified either the short description or description, but you have to keep those in consideration. Any of those fields out of box that are part of what we're summarizing, have we modified those in any way? And then I think simply you could see if they're going to impact your Now Assist or not. And any state choice values out of the box, or have you changed anything? And a good example, and a use case that I see more times than not, are where customers are doing something with resolution. And when I say doing something with resolution, it could be one of many. The things I see out there are that I've introduced some custom state values. So instead of close complete, I go to resolved, or I just go to other values that are not out of box. So those may impact what you're trying to do with resolution notes with the out of the box skill. So these are things that you'll have to think about. Also, I've seen other customers who have a resolution dialog that gets populated when the case is going to a close status. Well, out of the box, our resolution notes summary populates it brings up a dialogue, it presents that dialogue. So now you would be impacting the user experience by having two separate dialogues being populated to a user, when that's probably not the best experience. So again, these are things that you would want to look at as you're looking to implement Now Assist for HR service delivery, So you could tackle those prior to, UAT, or prior to understanding that, hey, this is really impacting, out of box functionality and where we really want to be. We may have to rethink what we've done with the custom statuses or any of the resolution workflow that we've customized, because now Assist has a skill that does that for us. So considerations for HR case, and we'll continue on with a few more here. So are there any additional mandatory fields as part of your case resolution that need to be factored into any of the prompts? So again, custom fields, then evaluate how that's going to impact out-of-box functionality or enhance out-of-box functionality if it's just fields that we're adding to the skills. Are there any customization to the next experience workspace that you should know? Also, these may impact the skills behavior. So if we customize workspace to where we're doing something different that's out of the box, or maybe we did one customization on the core UI and a separate customization on the workspace, you still have to evaluate those separately. So not to get too technical on this call, but we have different workflows that are triggering like resolution notes in the core UI than we're doing for the workspace. So if you're looking to undo something you've done to achieve out of the box functionality, those are things to keep in mind. And then are our agent roles out of the box, or have we used any custom roles that need to be factored in? And the reason being is because a real life example where one particular customer extracted a knowledge writer role from the parent role that it was encapsulated in. So when they did that, their users were not able to create not or generate knowledge articles from within the product. And it was all due to generating knowledge articles required a certain role. And this particular customer had customized the role. So anything that was contained in that role wasn't the same out of the box. Again, I won't go down this too deep, but you have to understand that you've customized any roles, maybe pulled a role out that was a role that was included. You're going to have to evaluate that. Is that going to impact our Now Assist for HR service delivery? And typically, I don't see it with cases because we're using the HR basic role or case writer role or those roles that your case your agents would have already. But things to think about as you move forward: any customizations to roles, fields, workflows, we're going to have to evaluate that to see if it's going to impact our Now Assist deployment. All right, so we're going to move on to two major challenges that I see. One of the challenges, knowledge management is lightly segregated. So an example would be policy articles for all reasons are returned when I search for them. So it may be that use case to where I'm a HR agent or I'm a service desk agent facilitating IT and HR, and I have the ability to see all of the articles. So where that will impact you is you may be wanting to go to the portal to see your tuition reimbursements. So now you're going to have issues to where you're seeing everything and it's not really prioritizing your region or your location or any attribute specific to you. It's not prioritizing that to where it's boosting it to the top. And again, we'll show you in the demonstration how we could cover that use case. The second challenge is that we've been using the catalogs for years, and HR has been around for a long time. The scoped HR has been around since Istanbul, so for quite some time. So we may have built our catalog not even thinking about Now Assist or not even thinking about catalogs being conversational. So all of our workflows and functionality is built into UI policies, scripted UI policies, and scripted catalog client scripts. And some of those functions within those scripts may not be compatible with our conversational catalogs. So those are the second challenges that we see with customers, to where hey, my catalog is 1,200 catalog items and 20% of those are non-conversational. Systemically, we identify those and we give some insight as to how to rectify it, but it's still going to take some work prior to implementation to understand, are we going to make all of our catalogs conversational? Are we going to keep some conversational just due to how many fields have to be answered? We may have a catalog item where I only have to answer 5 questions. That seems pretty simple, and I think is a good user experience. But if we're talking about a catalog item that has 56 questions and I have to answer those in line within VA, that may be overwhelming for the user to answer 56 questions, one after the other in VA. So we have to find a sweet spot to where it's still delivering the good experience that we're looking for, but not overwhelming the employee by asking them all of these questions in line within VA. That may be a use case to where we want it non-conversational, so it could open in the traditional, record producer catalog item window, and I could answer it as I would typically. And we facilitate that, because anything that would be conversational and you don't want it to, it's just a checkbox to make it non-conversational. So the net, what I would like you to gather from this slide is these major challenges. Is my knowledge where we want it to be? Is it segregated enough to where we're comfortable with it? And if so, then we're able to move forward and can refine even more using things like result improvement rules. Secondly, where's our catalog? Do we have a lot of catalog client scripts? Do we have a lot of scripted UI policies? Okay, if we want to make all of our catalog items conversational, we have to make that focus as part of our project. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some knowledge management best practices. And just as a follow-up, I do have links to some great collateral within our community that some of our ServiceNow employees have authored to give insight on what the knowledge management best practices are in terms of Now Assist. So getting ready for Now Assist, what are those best practices? And I'm summarizing here, but you could certainly double click into any of these after reading that document. So some of the quick tips or best practices for knowledge management is, one is maintaining a single source of truth and reduce duplicates. So you don't want 2 articles that are basically duplicates served up. We're gonna incur some ambiguity. Using native knowledge bases in ServiceNow works best within our Now Assist product. So we can certainly link out to SharePoint, index and return those articles, but we're giving the summary when it's an article that's within ServiceNow. So we're summarizing those articles based on the data we captured from ServiceNow. And when I say summarizing, I'm talking about the Now Assist Q&A summary, where we got a quick snapshot, and I'll show you what that looks like in the demonstration. I'm creating hyper-focused knowledge articles and reducing links. So there are some customers who 90% of the article content is links out to other knowledge articles or out to other SharePoint, other external sites. Those aren't going to be items that the LLM could crawl and get that information externally when it's just through a link. So although manually a link could direct somebody to more information, it's not something that's going to be summarized and gives a logical representation of what that article is all about. So reducing links, giving more content is a better practice. Just a quick pause, just a reminder to put the Q&A in the Q&A if you have any questions as we move along. I'm using concise, plain language and avoid jargon, technical terms, and abbreviation. I think this goes without saying, so we don't want to be we want to be more precise in our articles, because that's what the LLM is going to summarize. That's what we're going to present to the requester. For FAQs and Q&A type templates, provide definitive answers, context, and consistent formatting. And a good example would be is like, does my region get tuition reimbursement? And if the Q&A just said yes, that's not giving the LLM a lot of context. So we would want more context and maybe answer for that question. Yes, your region gets the tuition reimbursement. So it's just more context to help the LLM understand instead of just adding yes. So part of our FAQs or Q&As, just be more precise rather than short. Providing content in text alongside images, videos, and attachments. So again, just to allow our LLM to understand what's in that article. Ensuring articles are relevant and up to date. So are we still talking about mainframe things that don't even exist in the company? Do we have knowledge articles on AS400s, and those machines have been gone for years. So we don't want those as part of a query. We want articles to be relevant, and we want them to be up to date. So, just a quick, snapshot. We don't want the review date to be 5 years down the road. We want to be able to maintain that article and keep that technology and that content up to date. Maintaining consistency and quality via governance. Typically, a knowledge process, KCS, we just have governance around our knowledge articles. We have input. So this is part of using templates and things of that nature. We can maintain that consistency. And then utilizing actionable feedback. When I work with the customers that are deploying and they're in UAT, I recommend, hey, use the feedback, on your articles, use the feedback on the summaries to help train the LLM as you're doing your UAT. It's only going to facilitate, more information getting back to the LLM that, this piece of summarization was correct, this wasn't, as well as the actionable feedback to, create a task that gets in somebody's queue to say, this article needs to be updated because the technology changed. So moving on to conversational catalogs. So conversational catalogs are a way to deliver a good experience because we're asking questions in line. So if it was a matter of a tuition reimbursement, I could ask, what is the school? What's the start date? What is the cost? Get all the information, then we're done. So again, you have to think about, well, are there too many questions for a VA conversation? Does it just go on too long because it's one right after the other? So one thing to think about. Conversely, you also want to think about, well, can we use slot filling? And slot filling is a mechanism that we use in VA and conversational catalogs to fill in information that has been provided by the user already. So if I go to create a tuition reimbursement request, I could do things like say, I'm going to UIC, I'm taking Java development, the class starts in June of 2025, it ends August 2025, and it has a cost of X amount of dollars. So seeing those variables can be that the slot filling can automatically answer those questions without the user being presented with the question again. So that's what we call slot filling. We have additional things that are customers are entitled to as part of Now Assist, like Knowledge Graph, where Knowledge Graph can do part of that slot filling for us. So not to get in too deep, that's kind of step 2 of the implementation is looking at things like Knowledge Graph. But slot filling is definitely a way you could better the user experience by just a typical conversational catalog. But again, another thing that we have to evaluate when we're going to implement is, how are we going to implement our catalog? Are we going to make it all conversational? Are we going to have it split? And then what's the experience we're delivering to the community? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into a demonstration of result improvement rules, and I'll go into some demonstration on the conversational catalogs, more of what they look like, how we can identify what's conversational, what's not conversational. I'm not going to go into the depth where we're going to go into VA and start modifying objects and things like that. So what I'm going to do is go into my instance. And my use case is I have users in different regions where they want to find out about tuition reimbursement. So the example is all of these users have access to all of the knowledge that talks about tuition reimbursement. And I use states like New York, Ohio, Florida, just some of the few states that I use. And I'll show you how I constructed that result improvement rule to deliver the use case. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to impersonate one of my users, and I'll start off with Janie. And what I'm going to do here is go to the Employee Service Center. I'm going to go to my EC Pro portal, and I'm just going to engage in VA. The first thing I want to show is I have Knowledge Graph configured on this instance, and Knowledge Graph could provide information based on, the Knowledge Graph diagram. It could get information without me having to create a VA conversation for it. So I don't have a catalog item to understand where this user is located. I like to use this as part of my demonstration because then it keeps me honest on the articles that are being surfaced. So you can see that I'm not using any demo magic. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask, what is my location? And we could see that this user is in Ohio. So that was engaging Knowledge Graph, and you could see it pulled it from my user profile. Again, Knowledge Graph was something that was introduced. First use case was for HR service delivery. So I like to show it as I'm getting into, well, what kind of knowledge articles can I return? Seeing that Janie has access to all of the articles. So what I'm going to do now is just ask, what is my tuition reimbursement without stating a location. So simply, I'm going to ask Now Assist that question, getting my details. And some things I want to point out, and I've done this demonstration for customers and partners, and I can see myself where the LLM is already learning. So typically, when I searched this user, I was getting my article at the top, which I'm going to show you here. If I go to the article that it used as the source, you can see it's using this tuition reimbursement policy for Ohio. And as you can see up here, my user is in Ohio. So this is the experience that we want to deliver. I don't have, well, I'll keep going in my use case and then I'll explain later. And then I could go into my sources and I can open that tuition reimbursement policy for Ohio. So simple use case. Well, I'm going to impersonate another user just so you can see I'm not using any demo magic. And I'm going to impersonate a user in a different location. And Larry, I don't typically use. This is probably the second time that I use Larry as part of this demonstration. As you can see, he's being presented with some additional dialogues. And I'm going to go to my Employee Center Pro. And I'm going to do the same things. What is my location? And we'll see where Larry's at. I don't remember offhand. Okay, so Larry's in Florida. So I'm going to do the same thing for Larry. What is my tuition reimbursement policy? And given that I've configured a result improvement rule, if I was a betting man, I would bet that it's going to show me something that's a tuition reimbursement policy for Florida. As you can see, I have my tuition reimbursement policy for Florida. So that's in VA. I'm using Knowledge Graph is available in VA. I use that just to kind of show in my demonstration where this user is at. But you can certainly use that for your use case, the Knowledge Graph, to say, well, who's my manager? It may have been a new manager and I just haven't been introduced yet. So that's a way I could find out who my manager is, at least what's configured. So here I just want to search in the portal for what's my tuition reimbursement policy. And what I want to show you is we still have the top article was Florida because Larry's in Florida, but he also has access to Ohio, California, and Texas. So this is just returning through AI search all of what he has access to that matched his query. But you can see where I've refined VA using that result improvement rule to hyper focus in on where Larry is located to bring that article to the top. So for those that have use cases to where you have HR agents that have access to all the articles and you want them to focus on a specific article when they're searching, this is a good way to do it. And I've just demonstrated that through VA. So if there's any questions, please put in the Q&A, but we showed you the meal. So you saw the delicious steak and potatoes and broccoli. Now I'm going to show you how I cook that meal. So I'm going to end my impersonation. And I'm just going to show you the result improvement rule that I created in order to facilitate that functionality. So here's my Now Assistant VA, and I created this result improvement rule for tuition reimbursement policy by state. And I have a start date and an end date. It may be something to where, well, I feel I don't need to use this after the LLM is trained, and now I'm only getting one article for users that I've used already that have executed that query in relation to returning all the articles. So my tuition reimbursement policy by state, I activate on all the queries. I have some selections of I could apply to only the Genius results, but the important part here is to see the condition. So what I'm doing is I'm boosting by user context being dynamic. And what I'm looking for is the state. Whatever state that user's in, I want it to look at the meta field and then match the state. So I like using the meta field because it's hidden. It's not visible to users. I've seen other customers where they use the title, like they have tuition reimbursement policy Illinois, tuition reimbursement policy Indiana, and then they're using that to get the state. I think meta is a little bit easier. And then I have a boost weight. The boost weight is, without getting too mathematical, when AI search does its calculation of what a weight is, it gets a percent. And let's just say this document was 0.06% met in the retrieval augmented generation. So in the query. So I'm going to improve that by 1,000% and then send that to the top. We also have different things that we could use. We could send it directly to one article, but I like to use these dynamic methods because it gives a better experience. So this is simply what I did to achieve that functionality that you saw earlier, where I had different results for different users based on what state they were from. Okay, again, if there's any questions in the Q&A, we're going to jump over to the conversational catalog. So the conversational catalogs, I have this conversational catalog overview, and you would have this as well. And what this does is it gives you reasons as to why that item may not be conversational. So you can see I have 7 that are not conversational because of catalog client scripts. I have 9 that are due to pricing questions, which is not a supported feature in conversational catalogs. I have 4 that are due to multi-row variable sets. And if you're kind of catching a theme, we don't support multi-row variable sets in conversational catalogs currently. We don't support questions with pricing implications in conversational catalogs currently. So, and then catalog client scripts, they're probably containing some functions or methods, classes that are not supported in conversational catalogs. And the question you may have, and I can't see the Q&A, but it's probably going to come up to say, well, Mike, how do we know what's supported in conversational catalogs? And this is in documentation that we have on our doc site. it details the functions, methods, classes that are supported within conversational catalogs, as well as the field types. So pricing, multi-row variable sets are two that you'll see that are not supported. So if that came up in a question, there's too many to answer in line of a answer. So we would direct you to our doc site in order to get those details, and we'll provide links at the end of this presentation to put you in the right place to get all this information that I'm covering. So what I want to do is just go to one non-conversational item and then understand why it's non-conversational. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick report misconduct. So it's non-conversational. I could identify that, and before I implement, I may want to make it conversational. So how can I do that? So as part of the record that I pull up, the report misconduct conversational status, I have reasons and suggestions. And the reason is it's using a multi-row variable set. And an item contains a multi-row variable set, so I need to change that. Is there a way I could do that without a multi-row variable set? So we have the details and suggestions. So the details of why it's not supported and what the field is, and then some suggestions. And this one, it's just simply, remove the multi-row variable set to make the item conversational. So pretty simple, but this is one of those items, depending on how large your catalog is, it may take more time in order to understand what needs to be changed, or what we may understand what needs to be changed based on, going into the catalog overview, but the fine details are, the devils are in the details, meaning that, well, we have a catalog client script that's using an unsupported function, then it's just going to take that logic to work through the use case to understand how you can get that same functionality, but by using supported methods, classes, functions, etc. So that ends the demonstration part of this live on ServiceNow. For the resources slide, we provide some resources. You'll be provided the links as well, but we have the best practices to use your knowledge articles with Now Assist. This is one of our ServiceNow employees that authored this. I point all of my any conversation I have about generative AI, I reference this article. Great artifact. Getting started with generative AI and Now Assist for HR is a video. So again, you could watch that at your leisure. A Now Assist for HR Service Delivery Implementation Guide. I'd recommend that to read through it before you get started.
Hey, Mike, we're not seeing your screen. Were you sharing?
I was, yeah.
Okay. I just was thinking as you sounded like you were reading off a list, and I realized we're not seeing you. Sorry. That looks better.
Okay. Oh, thanks for that, Julie. my apologies all. The Now Assist for HR Service Delivery Implementation Guide, I would recommend reading through it. I've gotten great feedback. Our outbound BU wrote this article. We've been updating accordingly, but a great artifact to have before you get started. A lot of these things, if not everything that I've covered in here, is outlined in some way or another of that implementation guide. And then we have a Now Assist for HR Quick Start Guide. This is more of a blog to give other resources as well, outside of ones that we're pointing out here. So other videos, other artifacts, other knowledge articles. I mentioned about the methods or classes supported in the catalog client script or scripted UI policies. That's another link to our doc site where those are listed out specifically. And then as a more recent, we have the Yokohama deep dive for HR service delivery, specifically for Now Assist for HR service delivery. So some things I want to mention is maximizing the power of the AI platform for your business transformation. We have ServiceNow Impact, which can help maximize the power of the AI platform. by getting those SMEs that have the subject matter expertise to help you get over the hump and even help you along that journey. Impact is a great team to facilitate getting the most out of the product, getting the best adoption, and getting those subject matter experts that know the product well to help you in your journey. Training and certification. So there's some Now Assist for HR service delivery. There's some generative AI getting started. There's a lot of material and training around Now Assist for HR service delivery, agentic AI and generative AI, all together. And then certainly our expert services. If you get in a pinch and you need some help, or you are facilitating a new project and you need some help to implement, certainly our expert services will help you to implement and optimize with those subject matter experts and technical resources as well. So I made it with some time to spare. So we have about 7 minutes for any questions. Was there anything that came up in the Q&A that we need to answer live?
Yes, please. And also, can you go back to the beginning of your deck and show the 2 QR codes at the beginnings? There was a request for someone wanted to jump. You had shown the knowledge one and then the one about on slide 5. So we'll show that for a second and then move to slide 5 here in a second. And then I'll read you a couple questions. These were on the knowledge base. So the first one is, what is the best practice, a single or multiple knowledge base for internal functions? For example, legal, finance, facilities, IT, HR, etc.
That's a great question, because I think it warrants more details, because rule of thumb, if it's just a customer says, should I have one or more than one? It really depends on the process. I see more than one, and typically when I look at a customer's knowledge base and look at their process, it warrants more than one. Where I say that with some ambiguity is because there's times to where I see 50, and sometimes I take a look and kind of shake my head that that's way too much. So, let's look at this, how you're trying to segregate, how you're trying to have people authoring, how, what you want access to. I see more using multiple. I've seen rare cases just using one knowledge base, and especially where we have a lot of different business units on the same instance. It's typical that we're separating HR and IT. I mean, there may be some more sensitive material that's specific to HR managers that we wouldn't want to reside in an IT knowledge base. So for all intents and purposes, I would say the best practice has been more than one, but that's just based on, customers having large instances and a lot of business processes on the same instance. So it warrants having more than one.
Awesome. Thank you. If you'll go to slide 5, so we can pull up that QR code as well. And then I'll read you the other question here. Also about knowledge, this came in. What about user criteria to personalize by location or employee type? What should be the approach?
That could certainly happen. And we see that a lot when it comes to regions. And, sometimes some of the challenges that like some of our other applications address. But the key with user criteria is minimizing scripting. So from a knowledge-based perspective, I would say let's minimize user criteria. But if we need it to meet a business case, then we need that user criteria. Given that, that second point where we need that user criteria by location, do we need to script it? And if so, I would say let's rethink that, because scripting, and I always use the analogy of going shopping with a shopping cart and thinking that that shopping cart is the query. If somebody asks me a question, I don't want to, like in shopping, I don't want to get one item, go back to the cash register, get the next item, go back to the cash register. I want to throw all of my items in the shopping cart and take it up at once. When you use scripting or scripted user criteria, it's making that call one by one. So it's not the most efficient, but sometimes it's a must. I mean, we can't get that user criteria without it being scripted. So my point being is that let's reduce scripted user criteria. Let's try to reduce user criteria and give a good business case for each of those that we create to meet the business need.
One more on this. It says in this example, so when you were showing the example earlier with, I think it was Ohio, what would have happened if the location of the user was, for example, Washington, and there was no article for Washington?
If there was no article for Washington, it would have summarized those articles that it had available. So it could have been Florida. I really don't know. I mean, that would have been the LLM to decide. But in my article, I had everything the same except for the location. And all I did was just put the location in the meta. So I can't say for certain what would be served up if there wasn't a article for Washington. But my guess is it would have summarized all of those articles. And instead of just having one, remember I had that little one in a circle and I clicked on and I could see the source was just one document. My guess is that you would have had multiple up to your configured limit, probably 3 or 4, whichever of those that the LLM or AI search with the LLM found were the best results.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. One last question. How do you deal with the legal issues connected with allowing the employee to see only a fragment from an article, which let's say is based on a policy? If they see an inappropriate fragment or only partial information without a disclaimer saying the only true information is always the policy and not the knowledge article, the legal departments may be unhappy.
That's a great question because it brings up a point to where the way that Now Assist works with AI search and user criteria and everything is that, of course, the LLM could summarize all the data it has access to. But what we're saying when we use user criteria is, hold on, LLM, this user doesn't have access to see that knowledge block or that knowledge article. So and we could do that, that use case with either one. We could have had it in the knowledge article, or we could have had it in the knowledge block within the knowledge article. But using user criteria, for all intents and purposes, we're not showing or summarizing information that user wouldn't have access to already. So if I'm summarizing 3 documents, I'm summarizing based on that user having access to those 3 documents. I'm not summarizing something that a good example, and I see a lot, is union and non-union. There's a distinct line drawn between those two where we're not exposing one to the other. So I'm not summarizing non-union material for a union query. It's that union individual did not have access to that non-union material, knowledge articles, topics, etc. So I'm not summarizing information they don't have access to. But a great question, so I appreciate that one.
Okay, that answers all the questions open in the Q&A and in the chat.
Awesome. I think this takes us to the end of the session. So I appreciate everyone's involvement. I appreciate the questions, and we hope to see you in the next live on ServiceNow. And thank you. And thank you for the panelists that joined today and the question answerers.
Thanks, Mike.